Hey there, welcome to a new video. My name is Basie and today I want to present you 5 tips which you can use for your dubstep music productions. Make sure to watch until the end because the last tip will change the way how you think of music production and how you work in your DAW. If you are new here and interested into music production content, make sure to subscribe and also leave a like and comment. If you are watching from your mobile device, make sure to hit the hype button as well. Now let's finally get into the top 5 dubstep production tips. Tip number 1, always try to tease your main sounds in the build-up. It always sounds more cohesive when you tease your main sound from the drop in the build-up. That's my tear-out gun I'm using. For the build-up, I resampled it and I applied some convolution reverb. I love using the kHz convolver to give the main sound a more reverbed and washed out character, which is great for fake outs and also give your sound a different behavior. In this case, my washed out main sound sounds like this. Of course, there's some more processing behind the kHz convolver, which is some spec comp. And actually, I'm using spec comp Lite 2 here. I don't know why. It's a chain I saved last year and I'm using it all the time in this position right before crunching everything up with the distortion, and it always works because when I'm convolving the signal, it sounds really weird because when we disable it, it would now sound like this. Let me also disable the EQ. And you can hear it sounds a little bit distorted because of the convolution and the additional noise we are adding, I guess. And with spec comp, we are compressing it down again. Then I'm using an EQ to just balance out the overall frequency spectrum, getting rid of some of the low end, getting rid of some of the mids to make the main frequencies a little bit less present, and also getting rid of the high end. Then everything goes into my standard processing, which is the kHz distortion to just beef everything up. Of course, you could also start and mix this in as well, but I left the kHz distortion on 100%. Besides that, I'm also doing some filter automations, like you can see here. And a reverb automation, which is decreasing. This is a great way to introduce your sounds and already prepare the listener for the drop. Tip number 2, transient layers. I'm using this tear-out gun right here. I noticed that the initial hit, the transients, is getting a little bit lost, and this is why I added this additional layer, which sounds like this. I basically made this out of a noise impulse. I added the kHz convolver with the disperse 80 milliseconds preset and just resampled it, arranged it in this way, and just layered it on top of the tear-out gun, and together sounds like this. This just helps me pronouncing the initial impact of each gun hit a little bit more. It's not a drastic difference. Sometimes I even add an additional transient layer outside of the bass group to just emphasize it even more. But in this case, it felt right to include it in the bass group and crunch it all together with the tear-out gun. Let's listen without the processing and then you can hear the major difference. Without the processing, the gun and the transient layer sounds like this. And now without the transient layer. And again with the transient layer. You can hear the gun hits have way more impact than it's being processed with my standard chain. And this makes it sound really beefy and fat. That's a great way to pronounce some moments which are really important, like the initial hit of a tear-out gun. Of course, in dubstep, there are also other percussive sounds which are also great to add a transit layer on top of them. Tip number 3, sub-processing. There's always 2 steps I do for my sub-processing. This is my initial sub-bass down below. Let me also know in the comments if you want a proper sub-bass tutorial at some point. This is more about just the processing on how to beef it up. You can see and hear that there's a difference between this and this. I really love adding the kick-tight corpus preset to my sub-basses to just give them a different tonality. I don't know what it does. It just adds something to the decay, to the timbre, I don't know. But I'm always tuning this kick-tight preset to the key of the sub-bass. In this case, it's D sharp because the sub-bass note is a D sharp playing. And this is why I tuned it to D sharp. After resampling and arranging the guns, this is what the gun now sounds like. In the processing step, I always add an ambassador to the sub-bass to just crank it up a little bit more. This is the sub before ambassador. When you look at the EQ and with the ambassador, I'm basically maximizing the sub, so the loudness of the fundamental is basically being increased. The range is at 100 Hz and I'm using linear phase here, which is really important, so it sounds clean and tight. After the ambassador, I have another kick tight again, also on D sharp 0, which also helps me getting my sub flavor I want. The difference is shocking now, without and with. The kick tight preset also seems to add more loudness because I'm running this through my chain, which I explained several times on my channel already, but it goes into the kilohertz distortion, which brings everything up. After this step, the sub is fully maximized, as you can see in this EQ. Which is always my goal when I'm producing heavy dubstep and dubstep in general. Tip number 4, layering to enhance tonalities of certain sounds. In the second drop of this Thailand remix, we have this sound, which I made out of resampling. This was a sound I bounced several times. The original sound came out of Serum, I resampled the Serum, and then I resampled this sound 2 times again. But my point is that I layered this sound with an additional sound on top, which is this one right here. So I basically grabbed this Virtual Riot laser and I resampled it, so I was able to make these cool zap sounds. I basically just stretched this to 999 BPM on the texture mode, and the grain size were 12 milliseconds. So I got this. I rendered this to audio so I could shape it a little bit better to my needs. So I got this, which is just regular zap. I think this one even had a shorter length, so not 999 BPM, but probably something in between, and also a different grain size. So just play around with the length and with the grain size to get this kind of sound. This one is also reversed, I think, but this one, the layer, isn't reversed. I basically took this on the complex pro mode, stretched it differently and pitched it. So this one is +5. This one is +4, as you can see here down in the sampler. And this perfectly helps me emphasize the idea I had here. And these both layers complement so well with each other. So don't underestimate layering. Layering is really, really important and a great way to get more out of your sounds, which you already have in a project. Now let's get to tip number 5, which is also the most important in my opinion. It's about the general workflow. As you can see here, most of my sounds are in audio. There's only 2 sounds which I had in MIDI here because I was just too lazy to render them to audio, and the sounds weren't too important to layer them to audio. But you can see that I'm rendering everything to audio, so I'm able to exactly place all my sounds where they belong to. This really changed my life and also helped me to understand how I should process different sounds, because in audio you can see exactly what a sound looks like. This is a glitchy, crunchy sound with lots of disturbance and not a clean waveform. But this one, for example, which is the tear-out gun, has lots of stuff happening here, which is the initial tonality and the transients, and we have the sub bass here. And I know, okay, I need to bring up the sub bass at some point with ambassador, kick tight, and so on later in the process, and also distortion, of course. This looks like a transient, this looks like a tonal sound, so I immediately know how certain sounds look like, and I can get an impression of what they might need. In my recent bass battle episode, I was able to spot a seal sound out of an audio file. I just said out of fun, this looks like a seal. At the end, it sounded like a seal in the legendary submission by Seal Jules. Definitely make sure to watch the video with the seagull. It was really fun. I think you will love it and also laugh a lot. To conclude this, if you're working with MIDI a lot, try resampling your sounds so you can also draw tight volume envelopes. I always do this applying just some simple volume envelopes, because volume shaping and just envelopes in general are so worth it, because you can exactly decide where a sound is supposed to end, where a sound is supposed to start, if it's supposed to start a little bit more soft, if it's supposed to start sounding hard with a nice and sharp transients. There's many, many different ways on how to use this to your advantage. Virtual Riot also once pointed out that Skrillex renders everything to audio, so he can exactly place everything like he wants to, and he can do the volume fades / envelopes, which are highly underestimated, and it just works perfectly. So this is like the best confirmation this method works. It really changed my production life, and this is why I pointed it out in this top 5 tip video for dubstep music production. I included links for all plugins I used throughout the video in the description and in the pinned comment, so you can check them out if you're interested. Make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're on your mobile phone, also don't forget to hype the video, which are the best ways to support me and the video. That's it for today's video. I hope you learned something. See you in the next one. Have a great day and goodbye.